outside over there on the second floor there.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباءهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إن نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بالثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلك منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشاء نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركزنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسكناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننخسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سورة فاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأمل حي على خير الأمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. صلوات.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله وأسأله التوبة يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك الرحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. يا ولي العافية نسألك العافية عافية الدين والدنيا والآخرة يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم. أنت رب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على شهور. وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه. وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك من علي بفكاك ركبتي من النار فيما تمن علي وادخل الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك. إلهي عاملنا بفضلك ولا تعاملنا بيدك يا كريم بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا اللطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم أغني كل فقير. اللهم أشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكس كل عريان. اللهم اقض دين كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل عسير. اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض. اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر إنك على كل شيء قدير.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي وحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. In another 5 more minutes, we'll start the program. Ladies, make note, please. In 5 more minutes, we're going to be starting the program. Thank you.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم، أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو شهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار، في من تمن علي وأدخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم رب شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترضت على عبادك فيه الصيام، صل على محمد وآل محمد وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام، واغفر لي تلك الذنوب العظام، فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وعاظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وهلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيح له في عظمته. الحمد لله فاشي في الخلق أمره، وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما، إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيما، وغناك عنه قديما، وهو عندي كثيرا، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وسفك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي، عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي أتمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وعريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك. فصرت أدعوك آمنا، وأسألك مستأنسا لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مذلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن عبت عني أتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي عبت عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلا أمر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لعيم منك علي. يا ربي إنك تدعوني فولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك. كأن لي التتون علي فلم يمنع كذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي، والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل، وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك، مجري الفلك، مسخر الرياح، فالك الإصباح، ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول عناطه في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق، باسط الرزق، فالق الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى، وقرب فشهد النجوى، تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله ولا شبيه يشاكله ولا ظهير يعاذده، قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواذى لعظمته العظمى، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أنادي ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا عاصي، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنية قد أعطاني، وعزيمة مخوفة قد قفاني، وبحجة مونقة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد السائل ولا يخيب عامله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين ويدع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الحاربين، نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين، موضي حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى، وهو حي لا يموت، بيده الخير، وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وسفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك، وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وعنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى، وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووسي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك، وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. وصل على سبط الرحمة وإمام الهدى الحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على عمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي. حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وهفه بملائكتك المقربين، وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله. مكن له دينه الذي ارتديته له، عبدله من بعد خوفه عمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة قريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغنا. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشأب به سدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيذ به وجوهنا، وفك به عصرنا، وأنجه به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وآتنا به سعلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة عامالنا، وعاتنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسعولين وأوسع المعتين. اشف به صدورنا، واذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدونا وعدوك إله الحق. آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا، فسل على محمد وآله. وإنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فادخلنا، وفي إليين فارفعنا، وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا، ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا، ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فأخذمنا، ومن ثمار الجنة والحوم الطير فأطعمنا، ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا، وليلة القدر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا، وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا، وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا، وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا، وفي عذابك وحوانك فلا تبتلنا، ومن الزقوم والضريء فلا تطعمنا، ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا، وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا، ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا، ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم، من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل، أن تكتبني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور هجهم، المشكور سعيهم، المغفور ذنوبهم، المكفر عنهم سيئاتهم. وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل عمري في خير وعافية، وتوسع في رزقي، وتجعلني ممن تنتصر به لدينك، ولا تستبدل بي غيري. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان، أو يطلع الفجر من ليلة هذه، ولق قبلي تبية أو ذنبا تعاظبني عليه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا ذا الذي كان قبل كل شيء ثم خلق كل شيء ثم يبقى ويفنى كل شيء، يا ذا الذي ليس كمثله شيء، ويا ذا الذي ليس في السماوات العلى ولا في الأرضين السفلى، ولا فوقهن ولا تحتهن ولا بينهن إله يعبد غيره. لك الحمد حمدا لا يقوى على إحسائه إلا أنت، فصل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا يقوى على إحسائها إلا أنت. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي وقف السائلون ببابك، ولاذ الفقراء بجنابك، ووقفت سفينة المساكين على ساحل بحر جودك وكرمك، يرجون الجواز إلى ساحة رحمتك ونعمتك. إلهي إن كنت لا تغفر في هذا الشهر الشريف إلا لمن أخلص لك في صيامه وقيامه، فمن للمذنب المقصر إذا غرق في بحر ذنوبه وآثامه. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم إلا المطيعين، فمن للعاسين، وإن كنت لا تقبل إلا من العاملين، فمن للمقصرين. إلهي ربي الصائمون، وفاز القائمون، ونجى المخلصون، ونحن عبيدك المذنبون، فارحمنا برحمتك، واعتقنا من النار بعفوك يا كريم يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور، اللهم أغني كل فقير، اللهم أشبه كل جائع، اللهم اكس كل عريان، اللهم اغز دين كل مدين، اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم فك كل عصير، اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين، اللهم اشف كل مريض، اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك، اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك، اللهم اقض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر، إنك على كل شيء قدير. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
remove that card. Honda CRV. It's mine. Oh, you're calling somebody? You have the key, I can move it for you. Why not? Okay. Finishing the dua right now. One more minute. We're just waiting for the ladies to finish their dua. Another 2 minutes.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. يا زهرا يا زهرا. All together. يا زهرا يا زهرا. اے میری بیبی اے میری بیبی تیرے در پہ استغاثہ ہے تیرا ممنون میری شہزادی یہ جہاں سارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا تو ہمیں حفظ اور امان دے دے اپنی چادر کے سائے باندھ دے تیری قدرت میں کیا نہیں بی بی تو جسے چاہے دو جہاں دے دے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی آنسوؤں میں دعا مانگی ہے تیری تسبیح پر کے دل نے تجھے پکارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا دربار وہ سخی در ہے ہر فرشتہ جہاں گداگر ہے تیری مکروز آسماں والے تیرا مکروز ہر سکندر ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جواں کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر ہم رہے نہ رہے مگر بی بی تا قیامت رہے غم سرور یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا قرض مقروض کا ادا کر دے مفلسوں کا نصیب وا کر دے جن کی گودی بھری نہیں بی بی ان کا اولاد تو عطا کر دے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا صلو علی النبی
Dr. Seyed Shabbir Kirmani, Dr. Dungasi, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight's program has been sponsored for the Isal Sawab of Marhum Pyarli Visram Mukhi, Marhuma Ruqayya Bai Mukhi, Marhum Dr. Shakir Mukhi, Marhumin of Habib Visram Mukhi family, Marhum Ghulam Abbas Hassam, Marhum Barkat Ali Dinani, Marhum Haider Dinani, all Marhumin of Mukhi and Ashariya family, all Marhumin of Dinani family, all Marhumin of Khaki family, all Marhumin of Daya family, all Marhumin of Moladina family, all Marhumin of Lokhanwala family, all Marhumin of Khalfan family, Marhum Dr. Ibrahim, Marhum Yasmin Ibrahim, Marhum Daulat Ali, Marhum Miraj Begum, and all Marhumin of Mutsaddi family. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for all Marhumin. The month of Mahi Ramadan provides us with a unique opportunity with the attendance of our mu'mineen. So we request their attendance and support the programs at our center. We will be requesting all our members to contribute towards the family recommended contribution of $350 to cover Mahi Ramadan costs. Additionally, we are requesting iftar sponsorship throughout the month, especially on the first 10 nights when historically we have challenges. You can meet our treasurers in the back or donate online or the TV monitors where a QR code is present. We will be presenting our progress against our target fund of $150,000 throughout the nights of Ramadan, and to date we have alhamdulillah collected $87,000. Wow. We truly appreciate your assistance in this manner, for your funds help us run our center throughout the year along with its programming. May Allah reward you and your families for your generosity. Tonight, after the main program, we will have 3 simultaneous Sehri programs taking place. Here in the men's hall, we will have our children packing food for the needy. In the ladies' hall, we have a program on health for the ladies only. And in the cafeteria, we will have a program for gents only on the rights of a Muslim before and after death, presented by Brother Masoom Ali. Your participation in all 3 programs is requested. Tonight's Surah Yasin was sponsored for the Ithal al-Sawab for the following marhumin that are displayed on the screen. Let us recite Surah Fatiha for these marhumin and all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Lastly, please join me in reciting the ayah of Amma Yujibu 5 times for all those who are sick here and around the world. We have received news from Allentown that one of our brothers, Brother Abbas Salih Isa, is not doing well, and we are requesting you all to remember him and all our brothers and sisters. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Allah. Lastly, I would like to call up the president of Al-Mahdi Center, Brother Hussein Aziz, to say a few words. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I don't see Dr. Kirmani. Is he here? Where is he? Where is he? Then we'll ask Uncle Ahmad to come and give us majlis for tonight. Where is Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat? Is he here? Muntazir? Is he here? Adani? He's not here yet? Okay, can we please have him? Firdaus, can you please call... and while we are waiting for the Sheikh, I just want to... there he is, okay. But with my... Sheikh, you are worrying us for a second. Because I was looking at either Uncle Ahmad or perhaps even Muhammad Murji to come and... but Alhamdulillah, you saved us. For Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat. Our resident Zakir Malim Dungarsi, our chief guest speaker Dr. Shabbir Kirmani, my elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun Alaikum. Today marks the final night this Ramadan, where we get to hear our guest speaker, Dr. Seyed Shabbir Kirmani, one of our 4 speakers scheduled to recite in this holy month of Mahi Ramadan. His address to us has no doubt been enlightening. His whole theme has been about how we can go for excellence in our lives and be the best versions of ourselves. He has reminded us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that we are the best of His creations, and in order to realize that potential, we need to control our nafs. And as Dr. Kirmani says, annihilate our egos, the first step toward realizing our full potential. Dr. Kirmani in one of his sermons says, how many arrows are we willing to take so that we can truly apply Islam in our daily lives and live fully in the present world and in the hereafter. He then looks to what it is in the Holy Quran and the works of Ahlul Bayt for inspiration. And as part of the struggle, Dr. Kirmani asks us to ponder on leadership exhibited by our prophets, mentioned in the Holy Quran as Nabi Ibrahim, Nabi Musa, and Nabi Luqman. Maulana Kirmani, thank you for your sermons. They are both captivating and inspiring, and I'm sure our community is better for it. And will leverage the knowledge you have imparted in their quest and struggle to be the best version of themselves. And as you point out, is the essence and the reason to be here. We have truly enjoyed your presence. You have connected us so well with our youngsters, not only via your addresses to the community, but also with your presence in engaging them via sports. You have participated in both the volleyball and soccer tournaments and have made quite an impression, and I can tell you that our youngsters are extremely appreciative. And so have our elders via your sermons. The Gham Bayan of last night in Urdu, where as is customary to remember Aba Abdullah on Thursday nights, which our resident Zakir Dr. Dungrasi always reminds us, was very much appreciated. You truly did justice to the remembrance of Hazrat Ali Akbar and the love Imam Hussein had for him and his tragic parting. And while we will miss you, Dr. Kirmani, this is surely not a farewell, but an invitation that we would like for you to come back again and again. As president of our community, I've received calls upon calls from our community members of how impressive you are and that we need to have you visit us more often. And inshallah, we will make every effort to make this possible. Once again, Seyed Kirmani, our heartfelt thanks to you and our very best wishes to you and your family. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And with that, Dr. Kirmani, I will ask you to please come and address us one final evening this Ramadan. Per Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Very humbling to say the least. It's
That's good. That's better. I think maybe. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, is this right here? وآل محمد صلى الله It's very humbling to say the least. I don't really have words for this community and its hospitality and generosity and kindness and love and appreciation. Just know that you are in my prayers, and I can't ever forget you, for better or for worse. But it's really been I'm actually quite sad that this has come to a halt. I'll be in your same city, inshallah, but hopefully, inshallah, we see each other again. And hopefully, this is the beginning of marking a journey towards excellence, and not the end. This is just that beginning. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وسلم وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
وأوحينا إلى أم موسى أن أرضعي صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل. My respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in New York or across the globe wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is the responsibility of excellence? We've come to the culmination of our discussion and our conversation at this very junction where we've been inviting ourselves and yourselves through the Quranic endeavor, through the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid, the constitution for our life, to become excellent in life and to make sure that whatever we do in our life, we do it to the best. We have narrations where Rasulullah was amongst his companions once and they were making a grave for someone who had just passed away. And at that point in time, they were just putting the mud and the bricks in a very haphazard way. And at that point in time, the narrations say that the Prophet, when he saw this, after they had finished, they thought they had finished, the Prophet actually went and began to straighten the bricks and align the mud and make sure that everything was proper. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what are you doing? He said, it's just a grave. He says, no, when you do something, do it appropriately, do it properly. Don't do it haphazardly. Don't do it without a degree of excellence. Don't do it without putting attention to detail and attention within it. So within this, we've been discussing in Islamic philosophy that in order to get to the height of what Allah has made me and you and I, He's given us this ability to rise, and He has made you and I ashraful makhluqat, the best of His creation. But ask yourself, if you had big shoes to fill, right? If you were from a particular family, you had a certain lineage, you had certain things to do, what would you do in that regard? And for example, if you come from the famous families of America, the Rockefeller families, for example, the Pierpoint, the J.P. Morgan families, right? And these families, and imagine someone says your father was X, Y, and Z. Or your mother was this renowned academic, scholar. You have big shoes to fill. And at that point in time, at that junction, you would have this idea that, oh, I really need to do something in life. So who's your father? Who's your mother? Someone would say, they come from a certain lineage and certain bloodlines. I had a friend of mine who was from the Jewish faith, and they tracked bloodlines in the Jewish faith as well. And so his line went back to Musa. And he actually had he had genetic tests done, and he found that there was similarity in that space. Regardless, what I'm telling you is, they left that with an impression that there's some responsibility here. Similarly, if someone says they're from the line of Ahlul Bayt, or otherwise, what's your lineage? What's your descendant? What if I told you that you don't come from ordinary bloodline? What if I told you you're destined for great things? What if I told you that your father was a prophet? Say what? Was Adam alayhi salam not all of our fathers? Are we not called Banu Adam? The children of Adam? That is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His majesty through this representative on earth, and you and I have those sprinkles of the ability to be excellent in every domain, bloodline wise, genetically wise, and also the intellect that Allah has endowed us with. Yet, oftentimes we don't get to that. So the culmination of this, we went through the journey of the Conference of the Birds of Attar, which was based on Islamic principles, but it was poetry inspired on that journey of irfan and spirituality. And we went to a culmination reminding you of these notions and the ideas of Iqbal, where Iqbal was saying, you forgot your heroes, O Muslim world. Iqbal was a Sunni, at least apparently. But he was saying, you forgot, O Muslims, you forgot your heroes. Your heroes were Ali, your heroes were Fatima, your heroes were Hassan, your heroes were Hussein. And you can check all the poetry of Iqbal on this regard. And he says in numerous places, he says, for example, in his Farsi Diwan, Maryam as yik nisbat Isa aziz, as seh nisbat Hazrat Zahra aziz. Maryam is exalted for one reason. Fatima is exalted for three. He says, Maryam is exalted because she's the mother of Isa, for example. But further than this, when it comes to this discussion, he says that Fatima Zahra is exalted beyond that. Why? Because she is the daughter of Rasulullah. And further, because she is the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And further, she is the mother of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. But many people misinterpret this, that, oh, Bibi Fatima is exalted. Iqbal saying she's exalted because of this. No. Iqbal, when commentators comment on this, he's saying, in fact, if you go into the details of it, he's saying that nobody comes out without having this type of supporter. That is, Rasulullah's mission could not have been done without the support of Fatima al-Zahra. Because whenever Rasulullah needed solace, he would come to Fatima al-Zahra. Amir al-Mu'mineen would not be able to, for example, be able to traject that path had he had not had the support of Fatima al-Zahra. That's why Rasulullah said that had there not been a kufu, had Fatima not been there for Amir al-Mu'mineen, or if Ali had not been there for Fatima, there'd be nobody to marry Fatima. There were supports in totality. Further than this, Hussein didn't come out of a vacuum. Hussein came from the house of Ali and Fatima. That is, the pivotal role of this individual gives rise to greatness. And furthermore, the different lines of poetry. But remember, if you never remember nothing else, is the Shaheen, the falcon that Iqbal talks about. You and I are those falcons that Allah has created. And we are spending our lives, metaphorically speaking, on the ground, when we were not meant to be on the ground. We were meant to fly high in the skies to do things that were seemingly impossible. So Iqbal says your solution to your problems in life is vision. Everything should have vision. You wake up in the morning, you should have a vision why I'm waking up in the morning. You're doing business, you should have a vision of why you're doing this for the sake of God. How does this connect to the sake of God? When you have a community, you should have a vision of what you as a community are striving towards. If you don't have a vision, what are you doing? You're just checking the boxes. You need to have a vision that you're striving towards. It's important to make sure. So he says, make sure that you don't do anything that compromises your flight as a falcon, as a Shaheen. He says, "Eh tahir-e lahuti, us rizq se maut achhi, jis rizq se aati ho, parwaz mein kotahi." He says, oh bird, that you're meant to fly very high. It's better to die than have that risk, that sustenance that comes into your life that causes your flight to decline, causes you to fly lower. You may think that, for example, I'll get a deal here and there and you'll get some money, but remember, there may be no barakah in that money, for example. You may, for example, realize that in that process, your memory gets tainted. As I alluded to in Jummah Salah, for example, when I talked about this idea of the Alfred Nobel and Nobel laureates and the Nobel Prize. He thought that he was going to go to the grave known as this chemist, but he was known as the merchant of death until he was the one who patronized the Nobel Prize because of the TNT and the dynamite. So the question is, how will you be remembered? How will I be remembered? And remember, the impact, the world remembers those who did things for the betterment of society. Now you may say, I have a business, I'm working, how can I do that? Believe me, if you tie in a force of good within that, you can do tremendous things. Don't think zero sum here or there. Tonight, culminating this conversation, I want to give some practical principles that may help you in your life to make sure that we have a strong foundation for the future and we build there so that there is harmony in families and harmonies in relationships. There are certain things that we need to reflect on towards that path of progression. So the first thing I want to discuss is, how is it that we can practically implement certain things? How can we step on our ego, annihilate our ego, remove it for the betterment of the community, the betterment of society, the betterment of our world at large? The second thing that I want you to reflect on is, what is it that are first principles? What are fundamental things that we know to be true? And how can we build up from there? The next thing that I want to look at is, what is it about, coming to Lady Khadija, women and Islam in society today? Does Islam look down on it? What's the Quranic manifestation of that? What does the Quran say about the role of women with respect to this? What is it like being a lady in America today, especially one who practices Islam in the physical sense? Is it easy? Is it hard? What are some of the academics in America saying on that? And finally, what do we learn from the life of Lady Khadija salamullahi alayha that can help us implement things in our life and understand how she was excellent in many regards, and we can learn from that excellence regardless of gender. This is our agenda for the brief moments that we are together. Wherever you are, here in New York or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, when we're striving towards this, understand first principles. You and I, many times, one of the themes of this conversation and the Quran at large has been, analyze and reflect on what you don't know that you don't know. 3 categories of knowledge. What you know that you know, what you know that you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know. And the more you become aware of what you don't know that you don't know, you end up actually realizing more and more that there are things that you're not aware of. That's why Plato and the ancient philosophers said, all I know is that I know nothing. Because relative to what I know, there is so much out there. And so, getting to this point, what is the crux of this? Always consider for a moment that sometimes you see this in communities, people have good niyyah, good intention, but you need to validate the assumptions. Validate the assumptions meaning what? Someone may say, I want the best for our next generation. I may say that, I want the best for the next generation, for example. But the question is, you need to make sure that you study history, you have a robust conversation, you do analysis to understand the trends of history for the best degree of the community. I'll give you an example. This is a tale, well, we'll call this young man Ali. So Ali wanted to know, he had his mom made for iftar this amazing roast beef. And she was making it, and he's watching her make it, and he cuts off both ends of the roast beef, and she puts it into the pot, and she cooks it. And he says, Mom, this was amazing, this was fantastic, this is the best iftar I've ever had. He said, I just have one question. I said, what's your question, dear? He said, why did you cut off the two ends of the perfectly good meat? Or like it looked perfectly fine, we could have eaten that. And you threw it away. He said, you know what, Ali beta, I don't know, but I learned this recipe from your grandmother, my mom. She's alive, you need to go ask her. So he goes to the grandmother, says, you know, Dadi Jan or Ammi Jan or Nani Jan, says, you know, that I had this amazing roast beef, and mom made it for iftar, and she said she got the recipe from you. I had one question about why she cut off the ends of it and threw it in the trash. It looked perfectly good. This was like expensive stuff, this is good stuff. So Dadi Jan or Nani Jan says, you know, I don't know, I learned this from my mom, your granddaddy. And so you need to go ask her. She's still alive, go ask her this question. It's a good question. So she goes to, you know, the Dadi Jan or Nani Jan, says, can you please tell me why is it that this recipe that I've been eating that's amazing, that I had today, the ends of the meat are cut off and tossed away and thrown away? Because mom doesn't know, grandma doesn't know, and they all said they got the recipe from you, and you're the one who knows the answer. What's the answer? Why? It doesn't make sense to me. Why would they cut this off and throw it away? And she says, Beta, you know what the reason is? He said, what is it? He said, you know, when I was making the recipe, the pot that I had was too small, so I couldn't fit the meat in. I had to cut it out and throw it out. So that's why I did it. He said, oh. And then he mentioned this to the other individuals, and they said, no, we never knew that was the reason. So they had no reason to throw this away today. They had a reason perhaps at that time because she didn't have any reason. But nobody asked the question, why is that the care? The Cobra effect teaches us this as well. Did you validate the assumptions? That the British had some assumptions and they were not thinking in second degree orders. If you go, I mean, there's a town not far away from here, and check this, by the way. Times will come, people will come. The question is, we have to have KPIs in our community. We have them in work, don't we? We have these key performance indicators. What are our retention rates in our mosques and our imam bargahs, right? What's our growth rate? How many people are coming? Like, these things need to be tracked to understand how much value is being added or how much lack of value in the perception of people is there. And how is it that we can actually make it such that people don't feel like they're losing anything when they're on these progressions? Because otherwise what's happening is, I told you as in Jummah, zero-sum game. Mosque is losing to life. I don't have time. And the reality is, this was supposed to be a place where people become their best selves and go back into the battlefield of life. But it seems at times that we've gone away from that model. This was a place where when you would come in the mosque, there was not just a one-size-fit-all lecture series. There was different halaqat, circles, where people would discuss. Or for example, I'm hoping that you're reading the Quran with your families day in and day out in the language that you understand. So no one says, why don't I get this? This is very important to keep in mind towards progression. The next level that I want to talk about is building on Lady Khadija salamullahi alayha, that she is someone who gives us many insights into our life that we may not have considered. In fact, Benedict Kohler, in his book Early Islam and the Birth of Capitalism, he argues that the first VC in history on record is Bibi Khadija, the first venture capital firm, he says. That these types of caravans would be funded by her, and then she would support them. But it's something to keep in mind. Where did her wealth come from? Important point. When you look at the history of Islam, you will find there was Nabi Ibrahim, and then Ismail and Hajar were left in the desert. When Ibrahim and Hajar were left in the desert, she runs between Safa and Marwa, and eventually Zamzam springs out. Zamzam literally meaning stop. When Zamzam springs out, eventually, when you hit water in the middle of a desert, it's like you've hit gold or oil. And so that's the form of life. So eventually people were passing by, and they said, you have water here, can we stay here? Can we set up shop here? Can we live here? So Bibi Hajara says that, okay, you can stay here, but on the condition that there's some conditions. One of the conditions is that the custodianship of this Zamzam will be in our family, in the family of Ismail, in the line of Ismail. They accept. So eventually a small group come, then another group come, then another group come, and the people who are the others became, the foreigners became quite a big number. The people who are the migrants or the people who started settling there. Now eventually these people became the populace that was more, and they actually removed the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam and they had them go. When they had them go, they actually went to Yemen. When they went to Yemen, the narrations say they ended up going into business in Yemen and they became very affluent. After they became very affluent in business in Yemen, eventually they said, well, let us go back to where we came from in Mecca. And when they came back, this was the family of Lady Khadija. These were people who were mawahid. They were believing in one God. They were on the line of Nabi Ibrahim. They were hunafa. They were people who were, Ibrahim was called Hanif in the Quran. So they followed in that line. So Bibi Khadija inherited this wealth roughly at around the age of, at a young age, 10, 12 or some narrations say, from her father who had passed away. It was in her custody, and she was someone who used this wealth for goodness. What's the word that I want to share with you? The word is conscious capitalism. Capitalism in and of itself is not necessarily bad inherently. The question is it conscious capitalism or not? And that's really what's key. Are you doing it with ethics, with principles, with morals, or not? I'll give you an example. There's an entrepreneur on the West Coast, his name is Safwan Shah. He owns a company called PayActive. And he's a Muslim brother, and he said that, he was thinking, he's done several startups, but this was another one that now Walmart and many other companies are on board. He said that Rasulullah, in the Bible, it says that pay the laborer their wage before the sun sets, for they are poor and deserving of it. This is the Bible. In the Quranic and the Islamic prophetic mission, Rasulullah has said, pay the wage of the laborer before their sweat dries. Right? So he said, why is it that in America we pay employees on a 2-week cycle? If you're a business owner, you can close your ears. But for everyone else, why? Why do you take a free loan from, and nowhere else in society do you get to take a free loan from anybody. You're taking a 2-week loan, no interest paid, from your employees. So he said, this is not aligned with the Bible nor the Quran. How is it possible? So he came up with this concept called earned wage access. Do you know how much injustice happens to the poorer level of America, the working class in America? Do you know how much money they have to pay in terms of payday loans, in terms of auto lien loans, in terms of, you name it, fill in the blanks? 30, 40% loan sharking, and they're in a perpetual state of interest, debt, and labor. It's a slavery. It's a modern form of slavery. So this is not what Rasulullah wanted. This is not what the Bible wanted. This is not what any of the Abrahamic faiths wanted. And so he said, I'm going to do something about this. And so he said, we're going to give people their earned wage, whatever. If it's the 10th day of their cycle and they have 4 more days, we're going to make sure that they get access to that wage. I'm telling you about conscious capitalism. How did Bibi Khadija do this? She had all the money. Because she had all the money, she controlled the market. If she wanted, she could set the price at whatever level she wanted, undercut everyone else. She had no competition, total monopoly. You know what she used to do? She used to have a meeting and a gathering of all the merchants at the beginning of the trading season. And they would all gather at our house. And she would listen to everyone's grievances. And people would say this and that and that. And she would have them verified. And based on that, she said, we're going to set the baseline rate this year at this amount. So she wouldn't undercut everyone. So everyone had a fair shot, a fighting chance. This is what is meant by conscious capitalism. You and I, as members of this society, our job is to contribute, not just to say the drift of society is such. Drift, the water has a drift, the current of the drift. You go to Jamaica, there's a certain drift. You go to Silicon Valley, certain drift. The drift maybe in the Bahamas, people say, take it easy. Silicon Valley, do a startup. New York, I don't have time, I gotta go. Every place has a drift. You may not be aware of your drift, but the drift is there. So similarly, you may say, to do business in New York and to do business in this part of America and that part of America, this is the law of the land, this is the rules of the unspoken rules of the land. But no, Islam says, you change your environment. The people who are the prophets were not products of their environment. They were creators of their environment. You see, Ibrahim didn't say, this is how it is, okay, I'm going to be an idol worshiper. None of the prophets said, this is how things are, okay, let me just go with the drift. They said, yes, if the drift is good, very well. If the drift is not good, we need to correct the drift. Similarly, when we come to this, we need to keep those principles in mind when we move forward to the progression of society. Bibi Khadija in Rasulullah's marriage tells us very valuable lessons. You see, the relationship between the husband and wife, I've been mediating a lot in the past few years. I've been giving advice to couples. as much as possible. And sometimes, the relationship, somebody could be a king outside, but they come home, it's quite humbling oftentimes. And so they say there was an engineer who was a civil engineer who was a man who was looking after the blueprints of his house, and he was looking at the blueprints and sketching, and his wife comes to him and says that, what are you doing? He said, I'm making a blueprint for our new house. And she's like, for our new house? No, you need to go find another engineer. He said, why? Everyone comes to me. I'm the top engineer and architect in society. He said, no, you made that other person's house. Their wall is still kind of crooked. And so at that point in time, you realize that it was some challenge. Or the doctor, the very famous example that you often hear, that there was a doctor, he wrote a prescription for his son, and he writes the prescription for his son. At that point in time, the wife said, well, why are you writing this prescription for our son? He said, he's not well. And he's like, go ask your friend, the other doctor, to write this prescription. He says that everyone comes to me, I'm the best pediatrician in town, and you're asking me to go to somebody else. He's like, yeah, that other guy, you tried to give his kid a prescription, he's not okay till now, so you need to work on your job. So she didn't do that. And you'll find this, the essence of Bibi Khadija salamullahi alayha was what? That she was the first one who said that this is a Sadiq and Amin prophet. Of all those individuals who could have said that I have a doubt about him, it would have been, one would say it would be the house itself. But she was the first one who said that I attest to what you are saying, which is something that should not be taken lightly. Khadija salamullahi alayha is someone who gives us a model of what it means for the husband and wife to be on the same page. And that's why Ali and Fatima were on the same page. I'll tell you something. Sometimes in our communities we don't teach. This is where I mean our mosque needs to become a school of life. The in-between school and our normal work, and that in-between that teaches people how to live. Many people are not taught this. I'll give you an example. Sometimes your husband will say something to wife will say something to husband, there's some friction, but they don't know how to articulate the friction to the other side. Have you ever heard of I statements? Often not taught, but some people may have heard of them. I statements. Sometimes what will happen, the wife will tell the husband something, the husband gets all disgruntled, angry, and he thinks that she's understanding that he's angry, and then she won't say anything again, when in reality she's like, this guy's just grumpy. He's like, well, he needs to chill out. When in reality, he should effectively communicate to her what he's going through. And this is part of training at Microsoft, where Microsoft pays like $50,000 or whatever for each employee to get this training. At the executive level, you won't have to pay that here, so I'll give you a tip. And that is I statements. I statements are when you feel that you've been wronged and you're upset, rather than getting upset and holding the grudge inside, you say a very simple structure. You say, I feel blank. Fill in the emotion. When you blank, fill in the action that they're doing to you, that you feel that way. And finally, can you please blank, corrective action, what you want them to do. So for example, when you tell me what to do, I feel angry. When you tell me what to do, can you please not tell me what to do in that way? It's a much better structure to explain to the other person how you feel, and they get the message rather than arguing and bickering and these types. Number one. Number two, remember one thing. Never fight fire with fire. Have you ever heard of this? Fight fire with fire. Never fight fire with fire. Why? Because fire with fire burns the whole house down. Always fight fire with water. Water is what extinguishes. Now you say, how is that? One of the ways that you can do this is to genuinely, sincerely ask questions to understand perspectives. To understand what's going on in the person's life. The 5 whys that I told you at the beginning. It's not 5 different questions, it's just asking the word why, the question why, 5 times repeatedly, in a sincere manner to understand what picture is playing in the other person's mind. So that you can reconcile and apply that with the third person perspective of the difficult conversations. By the way, at the same time, to be fair to the sisters, I mentioned that sometimes the wife may be critical, but husbands are oftentimes no less. And so it's important that we realize that this is the institution of marriage, and both parties are very important and need to be looked after and respected accordingly. So this is the next level. When we're coming to this, one other element that you can actually try to apply for having a better quality of life in different domains is to see if you can sharpen your saw, husband and wife, children, throughout times. And that's one principle that can help you in various aspects of life. There were 2 woodcutters, and they would go to the woods every single day and they would chop wood. They would get there at the same time, they would leave at the same time. One of them would take a break in the middle of the day and go home and come back. And the other one would never took a break. He would be there from the beginning to the end, no break. But at the end of the day, the one who went home, every single time he would end up with 2 times more chopped wood, cut wood than the other person. So one day, he asks, he says, look, every single day we come to the woods and we chop woods at the same time, we start at the same time, we end at the same time. You go and take a break for an hour and come back, and I stay here. And yet at the end of the day, you have done way more work than I have. And I end up with less. What's the secret? What's going on? He says, you want to know the secret? I said, yes, I want to know the secret. He says, the secret is simply this. Every day, I take a break in the middle of the day and I go home and I sharpen my saw. And I come back. The principle here is in life, you have to continuously sharpen your saw. Sometimes that's reading more, sometimes that's learning more, sometimes that's a podcast, sometimes that's asking a mentor, sometimes that's learning. Whatever it is for you, you need to make sure you're doing that. Remember one thing, and the Quran attests to this. When you are struggling, struggle is a sign of life. As soon as the struggle ends, it is the beginning of death. As soon as you retire, it is the moment of death. Stagnant retirement is a moment of death. What do I mean? A man comes to sixth Imam, true story, sixth Imam, hadith narration. He heard news that there was a man who was a tailor and he had stopped working. So he called him. He said, I've heard that you're a very famous tailor in town and you're one of our Ahlul Bayt, followers of Ahlul Bayt, and you stopped working. What happened? He said, is it that you're not able to work anymore? Physically or mentally? Is there something stopping you from working physically or mentally? Are you mentally or physically disabled in some way that you're not able to work? He said, no, you have not that at all. He said, then why? He said, look, I have earned a certain amount of money. I have cleared all of my debts. I have a certain amount of money. I've cleared all of my debts. I don't owe anyone any money. And I feel like the money that I have can last me to the end of my life. So he essentially retired. Imam said to him, he said, make sure as long as you are able to work that you do not stop working. For this act keeps your mind sharp. And if you do not work for yourself, work for your dependents and never become dependent upon them. Meaning what? Was it materialism that they were after? Absolutely not. What they were telling you and I is that you need to keep going. Have you ever heard someone say that, I was the biggest tycoon in the 80s of this business. I was the biggest tycoon. As soon as someone says, I was the biggest tycoon in this era in the past decades, no, they're on the decline. Because what? They're not looking at the forward. They're not looking ahead. And yes, you may be at that season. You may be in another season where you want to help people and grow. But what I'm saying is, what you should start to love the struggle and tie that with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now come to this. 124, the next stage. 124,000 prophets, someone may ask, Allah didn't make any of them women. They're all male. Is Allah fair or not? Ayatollah Ibrahim Amini was asked this question, if I'm not mistaken. At that point in time, he said that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent all of these different prophets. And yet, at the same time, they're all men, no women. He said, why? He says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them mothers. That's equivalent. Why? Because mothers give rise to prophets. One angle. Second angle. What is the position of women in the Quran? What if I told you that the first indication of a lady who's mentioned in the Quran is who? The first one is the wife of Abu Lahab. Okay? That was one. Tabat yada Abi Lahab. But from there, everything's upwards. Nothing goes down. What happened at that point in time is, every single moment in time you will find the saviors of the prophets in the Quran are women. Proof, evidence. When Musa alayhi salam needs to survive, it's his mother who is holding the child in the basket, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what does he say? There's a question, does Allah do wahi on anyone except a prophet or an angel? Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِنَ النَّحَلِ. For example, we inspire on the bee to make its hives in the mountains. But Allah also says, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَىٰ أَنْ أَرْضَعِهِ. We inspired the mother of Musa to release the child into the basket. And Allah says, لَا تَخَفْ وَلَا تَحْزَنْ لَا تَخَفْ وَلَا تَحْزَنِي. Don't be afraid, don't be worried. We'll take care of him. So when it came to that, it was the mother who was the assistant. On the other side, at the end of the river, is a lady by the name of Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, who came and took that child into her custody. And no one else could have imagined But even the biggest tyrants sometimes, they are very small in front of their wives. The same was the case with Pharaoh in front of Asiya. She said, I want this kid. He couldn't say anything about it. At that same point in time, when it comes to this notion of the other side, what about Shu'aib? What about the daughters of Shu'aib? That is, Musa has left Egypt. He's killed someone, he's fled Egypt, and he's looking for guidance. He's praying to Allah, and Allah sends two sisters who are trying to get water from a watering hole from that moment. And at that point in time, Musa goes and he tries to get the water, and he helps them out. When Musa helps them out, they go there and they eventually have a conversation. One of the daughters says that he is qawiyun amin. He is strong and he is someone who is honest and truthworthy. And then the marriage ensues. Principles of leadership that you will find in the Quran. What did Allah say about King Saul or Talut? Zadatan bastatan fil ilmi wal jism. That is in knowledge and in body superiority. When it comes to the idea of this, furthermore, Musa, qawiyun amin, strong and someone who is honest or trustworthy. So these are principles that are there within the zeitgeist of what it means to be a leader as per Islam. Now, come forward to this. Maryam alayhi salam. Maryam is the one who delivered Isa alayhi salam. That is, Isa's delivery, Allah said that it will happen without a father, but the mother must be there. But here's another angle that people don't talk about. You know, when you go to the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, people say Yusuf was able to control himself, as the Quran says in Surah Yusuf. When Yusuf and Zulaykha's circumstance happened, and Zulaykha said he's the one to blame, and Yusuf said, see where the shirt is torn. And the Aziz checked. He said, well, if it's from the back, then that's Zulaykha. If it's from the front, then it would perhaps be Yusuf. And so we say that Yusuf controlled himself. And afterwards, Zulaykha invited all the women of the society, and she gave them fruits and she gave them some knives to cut them. And because they were blaming her. And then when Yusuf passed by, they began to slip and cut themselves. So this all happened. But people say, oh, Yusuf controlled himself. But hold on a second. What about Maryam alayhi salam? When the angel comes to Maryam alayhi salam, she says straight away, her taqwa is just as high, if not as high as Yusuf. She says that do not touch me, do not come near me, to the angel. And then the angel says that I've been sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah wills that you will have a child. And she says, how is it possible when no one has touched me? And then that ensues. So the taqwa has been saluted of this great lady, Maryam alayhi salam, who's mentioned more in the Quran, Maryam, than in the Bible. So you will find whenever push came to shove, those personalities who were of immense caliber were the women who saved the Prophet. Further come to riwayah. There's one moment I want to bring you to as I draw to a conclusion, or is this. Rasulullah, narrations say, all Muslims accept, when Fatima al-Zahra would enter into the room, Rasulullah would stand up and have Fatima al-Zahra sit down in his place. Now, these are all accepted by a Muslim. Now here's the thing. Is there any riwayat, is there any narration within Islam, within Imami Islam, Shia Islam, that any of the other Imams stood up for their daughter? That is this a hujjah or not? Is this something that is a father, today if you have a daughter, are you supposed to stand up for her? And you will find that's not the case anywhere. So why did Rasulullah rise? Ali Naqavi, Alama Naqan or Ayatul Naqan Sahib, he actually analyzed this and he said, the reality seems that at that point in time, the Imam of the world is Rasulullah. As long as Rasulullah is alive, Ali ibn Abi Talib is not the Imam. Remember, Imam is what Ibrahim was, Imam is the height of leadership. So the Imam is Rasulullah. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is going to be the Imam afterwards as soon as he departs. He has the light of Imamat, the nur of Imamat, but that functional responsibility is not applicable at that moment. But Fatima al-Zahra, he says, and other scholars say, she was the one who completed the message of Rasulullah. Why? Do you know how many rules in jurisprudence differ between men and women? How many in Salah? How many just the way of standing, the way of doing Salah, the way you place your hands, the way you operate? There are so many rules and regulations that Rasulullah could not and would not and did not show and exhibit in his own life. Somebody needed to be there. And that person who completed that equation was Fatima al-Zahra. So what Naqan says is that he rose because he was respecting Fatima al-Zahra as another leader, not as his daughter. Because otherwise, then every father would have to stand up for the daughter. And no other Imam had this principle. Meaning what? Meaning women have such an esteemed position in Islam that we sometimes, in our biased narrative, don't understand that reflection. Fourth level. What is it like being a young Muslim in America who practices. I've been to places in the deep south of America, in the Carolinas, after some young people were killed. For example, the dentist and the couple and these young Muslims were killed. And I've had these real conversations. You know, we sometimes say we impose our religion on others. We should perhaps first ask what's going on in their life, just to get a pulse, to get a heart of what's going on. And so there were sisters who said, you know, after this, we don't feel comfortable wearing the hijab in public because we're afraid for our life, especially after that situation. Now, within Islamic jurisprudence, there's a notion called uzr. Uzr is undue hardship, and that's a very personal matter between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's truly something that's an undue hardship, that's between you and Allah. Nobody has a right to judge in between. But what I'm saying is we need to have a heart for our sisters sometimes because it's not easy to do what they do in society. I'll give you an example. Dr. Julie Hogan at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. She conducted a study. She said, I want to know what it's like to be a young Muslim in America. So she goes and she wears a full hijab and she wears a full niqab. And she goes to a mall in Las Vegas. And she goes with her friend. Both of them are wearing this full hijab. So she says, well, I got there, and when I got there, nobody knows who I am behind the veil. So initially, we had a big problem getting a table at the restaurant that we went to first. Then when we finally got a table, nobody wanted to sit near us. She's explaining her experience. She said, eventually, then the waitress came, and the waitress was visibly upset, crying. And she said, because Julie Hogan is not a Muslim, and she's like, you know, a Caucasian female, she said behind me, she said, what is it? I don't have a bomb strapped to me. Why are you acting like that? She literally said that to her. And at that point in time, she realized that this is not the same experience that she's having in American society. She said they finished, they got up and they went to the mall inside. And when they went inside the mall, she said the reactions that we got were very different. So for example, I was walking by and then there was a kid who was saying, hey mom, look, a ninja. Or then furthermore, there was a group of some bigoted folks who were saying some very harsh things and some lewd comments. And she was baffled. And she went through a series of other things. Anyways, afterwards, she said, I then went back, she changes into, from her abaya and niqab, she changes into her regalia. You know what you wear at graduation? The robe and all the gear. It's physically very heavy. And so she was wearing it. She said, when I wear this in public in America, I'm treated very differently. I'm treated with a lot of respect. I'm treated with a lot of admiration. The people say thank you, they shake my hand and they say that you're doing a great deed, you're educating the future of America, and people are very supportive. And she says a line. She said, the garment, the garb, the clothing, the regalia of graduation is very heavy physically, but the burden is very light. But the hijab that Muslim women wear in America, the cloth is very light, but the burden is very heavy. Have we asked our sisters what they go through? Have we asked them what life is like from their perspective? That his hijab was supposed to divert attention away from the sister. You go today, ask any of the sisters, they'll say that when you walk into a gathering, if you're not wearing hijab, perhaps nobody will bat an eye. When you wear hijab, everyone's all focused on you. Everyone draws their attention in this society to you. So you draw more attention than otherwise. I'm not giving any fatwas here. I'm just saying we need to have some empathy and understand what is it that people go through and have a conversation that's real and substantive and not forced and judge people and say, oh, this person wears hijab, this person doesn't, and have our own perspective. Men, we don't have any ownership over women. I hope that's clear. And that's something that we're missing oftentimes. Like other men have this notion that if your sister is there, alhamdulillah, this doesn't happen in places like this, but some places this happens. And so it's important for us to understand that, if nothing else, we remember the following. And I know some brothers are very scared because they're like, this is not how it's going in my house. The dynamics have shifted. But the reality is, the husband and wife are a couple, and it's very important for us to be very respectful and caring. What does the Bible say? Love and respect. What was that book that I said? Dr. Eggerichs. The Bible says in Ephesians, a man must love his wife the way he loves himself. And a wife must respect her husband. The word in the Quran is qanitat. By the way, in the Bible, the word is phobite. A wife must have phobite. Phobite is Greek for phobia, struck with fear of husband. In the King James Bible, that became reverence. And in the modern Bible, that became respect. And so, it's important to understand the dynamics of the equation that are at play there. So that's what it may have meant in that context. Similarly, in the Quran, the word is qanitat. So it's devotional respect, as some scholars have said. It doesn't mean that the husband has any right to do anything that is less than to his wife. They're equal partners before the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear ones, remember, try to learn from each other to grow. I'm not really interested in doing any more divorces. It's not something that I like or enjoy, nor am I very interested at all in burying anyone's children. These are very, very hard pain points for me. We need to talk about drugs, we need to talk about suicides, depression, mental health challenges, and we need to have serious conversations about relationships such that we alleviate the burdens for our next generation. When it comes to the examples, remember this if you remember nothing else as we draw to a conclusion. On one side, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, we have Rasulullah, Ali and Hussein. These are our role models. But in Tashayyu and Shia Islam, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, right in parallel with Rasulullah, with Muhammad, with Ali and Hussein, you have the likes of Khadija, Fatima, Zainab. And this is so critical because they both give us strength. As the poet says, Mushkilon mein bajaye Naade Ali, main to leta hu naam Zainab ka. That this idea that Ali's name and Naade Ali has its reverence and importance. But when you think of courage, you often think of Zainab. How else can someone go through struggle after struggle and still have that beauty? One line of Zainab. And think about this over a lifetime. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. Think about this. Yazid is saying on one side that I have all the power, I have all the dominion, and look at what God did to your brother. Allahu Akbar. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I want to give you some solutions that help in life. Many times I see this wherever I go. There's something in science called the broken heart syndrome. That is, when one spouse dies, the other one usually dies within 5 years because of life is so different without that spouse, especially as they get older. So Dr. Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Phenomenal book. And he's the founder of logotherapy. He says that I had a patient, he's the one who had gone through Auschwitz and he had gone through the concentration camps and he had written this book afterwards, that people are looking for meaning. He had a patient come into his office and said that, Doc, I'm suffering. He said, why are you suffering? He said, I lost my wife. He said, it hurts? He said, yeah, it hurts a lot. He said, you can't do anything about it? He said, I can't do anything about it. So he asked him a question. Dr. Frankl says, can I ask you a question? He said, yes. He said, what would happen if the tables were turned? So what do you mean if the tables turned? What would happen if you died first and she was left to live? So would she suffer? He said, yes, she would suffer. The same way you're suffering? Yeah, she would suffer the same way that I'm suffering. He says that, can you understand and appreciate by letting her die first, you saved her from the suffering that you're now going through. He stopped, he stood up, he shook Dr. Frankl's hand, he said, I got it. And he left. He says, when we are no longer able to change our circumstances, we are forced to change the meaning around our circumstances. There may be a reason why that difficulty has come into your life. You need to understand what's going on that front. Why did I say this? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Yazid said, oh, look at what Allah did to you and your family, your brother. What do you say to Allah now? What do you say of Allah now? And she said, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. You may say, Zainab, how did you see beauty? And she says that I saw an uncle sacrifice everything to get water for her, for his niece and the children. I saw a son, when conversing with his father, saying to his father, that my father, are we not on the truth? And he says, definitely my son, we are on the truth. He says, then what difference does it make if death falls upon us or we fall upon death? And she would perhaps say that I saw a nephew say, when his uncle asked him, how do you find death? He said, ahla min al-asal, sweeter than honey. Or she would perhaps say that I saw a father, a brother, a Hussein give everything in the way of God. I saw this event bring out the best of humanity. You thought it would demoralize us? I saw the height of humanity. And that happened through that struggle. The question is, and this is what Viktor Frankl and many others have said, when times get tough and life gets tough, there's one final freedom that we have that no one can take from us. And that is what we think and what we focus upon. Yazid thought that he would get Zainab to just think about all the negative. She said, no. I control. That's freedom. That is what is meant by hurriya. What is Abu Abdullah called? Abul Ahrar, the father of the free man is Abu Abdullah. And if Hussein is the father of the free man, Zainab is the mother of the free woman. The basis of this is that you and I are only servants to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. Hussein personified this at the highest level. And as we draw to this conclusion, this family didn't come out of the ordinary. This family came from a particular environment of Khadija and Rasulullah. Khadija was very affluent, but towards the end of the life, she gave everything in the way. Bibi Zainab is not called Saniya Zahra, according to Ahlul Bayt. She's called Saniya Khadija. Rasulullah gave her that title. The second coming of Khadija. Why? Because the same way that Khadija salamullahi alayha had everything, she sacrificed everything in the way of Allah and ended with nothing in the material sense. Zainab was married into the house of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, the wealthiest person in the entire land. But when time came for Karbala, she left that in a moment. So the principle that emerges from here is there's no problem with wealth. In fact, it may be encouraged as a vehicle for good, because Islam would not have established itself without the wealth of Khadija and the sword of Ali and the message of Rasulullah. But the question is, does your material own you, or do you own your material? That's the question. Which is superior? When push comes to shove, can you let go or not? Or will you say some type of excuse? There were people in Karbala, up to the 9th of Muharram, they were with Imam Hussein. They said, Imam, we'll be with you until we're of no use to you, then we'll leave. Which side will you and I be on? Khadija gave everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The narrations say when Khadija gave everything, she came in her final moments, going through Shabi Abi Talib. She's eating leaves while others are hardly have anything to eat. She's eating nothing. She's starving. And the moment comes where she's ill, and she says to Rasulullah, she says, Ya Rasulullah, I want to give my wasiyah to you. I want to give you my final will. And husband and wife begin to converse. Says, Ya Rasulullah, I have some things I want to say to you as a final will and a final wasiyah. Says, my dear wife, what is it? Says that, when we were married, I may not have been meeting all the requirements and obligations. If there's any shortcoming from my end, anything that I've done that's less than that shortcoming, please forgive me. Rasulullah began to weep. He said, Khadija, when have you not been there for me? At every moment you've been there for me. He said, how can there be anything that is shortcoming? He says, very well. He says, the second one, I'm not able to tell you, Ya Rasulullah. If you'll give me the permission, if I can tell our daughter, maybe she'll tell you. Rasul says, very well. Rasulullah gets up, the narration says, and he goes. And Fatima al-Zahra, she comes. She calls Fatima al-Zahra, Bibi Khadija does. And she says, my daughter Fatima, I'm embarrassed to say this to your father, because he's given everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've given, and I've tried to help, but I don't know what to say. She said, I have some anxiety and some worry about the grave. And I don't have enough wealth to have a kafan, a cloth to be buried in. Can you please ask him to give me one of his shirts so I can be buried in that? Fatima al-Zahra conveys the message to Rasulullah. Rasulullah begins to weep once again. At that point in time, Rasulullah comes back, says, I have one last thing to say to you, Ya Rasulullah. Khadija says, Rasulullah says, what is that, my dear wife? She says, this daughter of ours, Fatima, please take care of her. Allah knows what was going through the heart of Rasulullah. Perhaps the images of what would happen afterwards, as Rasulullah was aware, came to the eyes of Rasulullah. This was the test of Rahmatan lil Alameen. Rahmatan lil Alameen. And there was no rahmah from the ummah on the family of Rahmatan lil Alameen. This is the struggle of Rasulullah, having to know that all this that has been done would be unturned. And the wife who gave everything would have to give everything away. There are narrations that some say that at that point in time, Jibreel descended, and Jibreel said, Ya Rasulullah, Allah has sent these kafans from Jannah. At that point in time, he says, one is for your dear wife, Lady Khadija, one is for you, yourself, one is for Fatima al-Zahra, one is for Ali al-Murtada, and one is for Hassan al-Mujtaba. The narrations say, attributed to Rasulullah, that the Rasulullah asked, where is the kafan for Hussein? Where is the kafan for my son Hussein? At that point in time, he says that Allah wishes and Allah wills that this is the test of Hussein. This is the struggle of Hussein. He will be buried on the plains of Karbala with no ghusl and no kafan. Ajrukum ala Allah. Azadaro do jumle sun lijiye. Ye Bibi Khadija ka maqam مقام تھا، مگر آئیے کربلا میں، یہی کربلا ہے، یہی آل محمد ہیں. ایک بی بی رات کے سناٹے میں مقتل کی طرف جاتی ہیں بعد عاشور، اور ایک شخص سے پوچھتی ہیں اے شخص مجھے بس نجف کا راستہ بتا دو. ایک 4 سالہ معصوم سکینہ وہ پوچھ رہی ہے کہ نجف کا راستہ کہاں ہے. ایک آئے بی بی نجف میں کیا کیجئے گا؟ انہوں نے کہا کہ میں نجف میں اپنے دادا علی ابن ابی طالب امیر المومنین کے پاس جاؤں گی اور ان سے کہوں گی کہ یہ جو کانوں میں بالیاں تھیں، یہ گوشوارے یہ چھینے گئے، یہ منہ پہ تماچے لگائے گئے. اے آل رسول، ہم آل رسول ہیں. اے امت رسول، یہ میرا بابا ہے، 3 دن کا بے غسل و کفن دشت کربلا پہ پڑا ہے. آخری جملہ امت نے یہ حد کر ڈال دی کہ امام سجاد سے پوچھا گیا، جابر نے کہا اے سید السجاد کیا مرحلہ آیا جو سب سے بڑا امتحان تھا آپ کے لیے؟ انہوں نے کہا بہت امتحان تھے، شام کا امتحان تھا اور بیویوں کا امتحان تھا، مگر ایک امتحان روز عاشورہ، مگر شام غریبہ آئی جو قیامت گزر گئی. جابر نے کہا کیا ہوا؟ کہا کہ شام غریبہ اشقیاء نے کہا کہ گھوڑے دوڑا دیے جائیں. اے جابر میں نے سنا کہ گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں کے نیچے میرا بابا پامال سم اسوا ہو رہا تھا، میں سن رہا تھا. اے جابر میں کچھ نہ کر سکا، جابر میں لاچار تھا. لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین. صلی اللہ علیہ یا رسول اللہ، صلی اللہ علیہ یا امیر المؤمنین، صلی اللہ علیہ یا فاطمة الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، صلی اللہ علیہ یا حسن المجتبى. السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین. I want to thank this community and the management committee who has been absolutely excellent with me. May Allah bless you and your families, inshallah, and keep us in your du'as. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
زہرا نے رو رو کر خدائی جائے، میری مادر بسایا خلد کو جا کر خدائی جائے، میری مادر کہاں زہرا نے رو رو کر خدائی جائے، میری در ملا داغے جدائی مجھ کو اسی سن میں ہزار افسوس، ملا داغے جدائی مجھ کو اسی سن میں ہزار افسوس، شفیع کوئی نہیں سر پر خدائی جائے، مادر کہاں زہرا نے رو رو کر خدائی جائے، در ذرا اٹھ کر کے دیکھو تو میرے بابا کی حالت کو، ذرا اٹھ کر کے دیکھو تو میرے بابا کی حالت کو، کھڑے روتے یہ اوریاں سر خدائی جائے، میری مادر کہاں زہرا خدائی جائے میں محبت آپ کی ہرگز نہ بھولوں گی میری اماں محبت آپ کی ہرگز نہ بھولوں گی میری اماں ہوا سنسان اب یہ گھر خدائی جائے میری مادر کہاں زہرا میری مادر لٹائی ساری دولت اپنی دین حق کی نصرت میں لٹائی ساری دولت اپنی دین حق کی نصرت میں ایمان لائی پیمبر پر خدائی جائے میری مادر کہاں زہرا
آخر کا وقت کہنا میرا یہ سلام ہے سب عاشق حسین کو میرا سلام ہے ساماشی تاب کر دے میرے دل کے چین کا پروردگار واسطہ مولا حسین کا حل کیجئے مشکل میری اب دیر ستم ہے عباس علی تم کو سکینہ کی قسم ہے یا موسی کاظم ہمیں آفت سے چراؤ یا موسی کاظم ہمیں آفت سے چراؤ میرے حسن حسین مصیبت سے بچاؤ زیارت امام حسین السلام علیکہ یا مولا یا ابا عبداللہ السلام علیکہ یا ابن رسول اللہ السلام علیکہ یا ابن امیر المومنین السلام علیکہ یا ابن فاطمة الزہرا سیدتی نساء العالمین السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین خصوصاً سیدی و مولا یا ابا الفضل العباس و اختک زینب وبنتك سكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولا يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء وفقنا الله زيارتك يا مولا ورزقنا الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة جميع ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان سيدي الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته برحمة وآل محمد صلوات
Okay, this is